So the flip side is you show up burnt out. A task takes you 2 hours when it should take you 1 hour. And maybe you're frustrated, maybe you're hitting a wall, everything takes longer than expected. Well, adding in that creativity the day before for like an hour or 30 minutes or 20 minutes is actually going to help you be more present and productive or reach your goals or whatever you want to do, right?
All right, Monica, I am so excited to have you here. I know you and I were just chit-chatting about like all the goodness that is going to come in this episode and how amazing and the impact it's going to have on people. So I know I just like want to dive in and get going and dive all in, but let's share a little bit about you and a little bit about your story. How did you get to where you are? All of those fun things for those people that maybe have never met you before and want to know just a little bit more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So excited to be here and thank you so much. But a little bit of background about me, and I think this will segue into what we're chatting about today too. Yeah. But I have an organic skincare small business that I started about 4 years ago. I grew that to multiple six figures, ended up leaving my corporate job to focus on my small business fully. And while I was doing that, I mean, there's so much else that happened during that time. I ended up owning 3 retail stores. I worked with over 100 local Chicago small businesses, learned really what they were struggling with, and realized on my end, I was like, oh, some of these business things that other handmade product-based business owners struggle with come really easy to me. So let me share what I know with them and teach them and support them. So that kind of flipped to a coaching program where I now really coach handmade product business owners on how to grow and scale their business, starting with places like Etsy, but then the full A to Z plan of how to grow and scale. So that's what I do when we talk about like what I do for quote unquote work or my job or my business. But I'm also a huge fan because I work with creatives and people who are super creative. I'm a huge fan of using creativity to not only potentially start or run a business if you want to use your creative outlet to actually sell it, but also creativity in terms of recharging and feeling your best and having something at the end of each day to truly recharge by like using your hands or painting or doing something. Yeah. And I think that that's going to be something that with what your message is will hopefully really resonate with everyone who's listening today.
Yes. And I'm so excited. I will say, I should actually send you a picture. You sent me one of your facial masks. And the other day, I've used it a couple of times, which is awesome. But the other day I did it with my daughter and I was like, come on, you do it with me. And she was like, no. And I was like, come on. And so we did it. And she was like, I look like a dinosaur. Like her face is all green and stuff. And so we took a picture. I should send it to you. It's super cute of us both like with our face mask on and the whole shebang. So thank you for that. But it was I was like, let's have a little mommy night. Like, cause the boys they were watching basketball or something. And it was just her and I was like, let's put our face on and we'll go watch a movie. And it was super cute. So we were like in our little robes with a face mask. So I think of you. Yeah. I think of you every time I use it. So
I love it so much.
But I think your story is so amazing. Even just, I know there are a lot of women who are looking for one, either a creative outlet, or two, they're looking for ways to add extra income and be able to stay home and be with their families, or to create something, or to turn this like passion project, something that they love to do that helps restore them and helps them feel good, but also make some money off of it. So I know we're going to go into a whole big thing. And I love like in the conversation you and I had, this idea of differentiating between self-care and recharging. And I think I actually recorded a podcast episode recently where I said, like, we've got to stop talking about self-care. Like, it's not about self-care, and people feel so guilty about not getting enough self-care. They're not doing it right. They're not doing, what everybody says that we need to do. And that the emphasis really needs to be on recharging. And how can we do things that are actually helping us to restore and recharge? Yes. And so I know for a lot of the women I work with, they're like, okay, that's cool, but I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know how to recharge. So what would you say are the differences between self-care and recharging? I'd love to hear your perspective on that. And then what are some of those things that people can do that are going to help lead them into recharging in maybe a creative fashion?
Oh my gosh, such a good question. And I love what you said about the difference between the two, because this is truly what hit me so blatantly, is because I was doing self-care like every single day. So I absolutely love what I do for my business. And when I'm working, I absolutely love it. And at the end of the day, I would be doing some self-care to quote unquote recharge. I would take a bath, or I would like read a book, or I would, watch a trashy TV show or whatever.
Yes.
And I would do these things and I'd be like, what am I doing wrong? Or even I would journal or meditate at the end of the day. And I would do these things and I'd be like, what am I doing wrong? Because I'm doing self-care, but I wake up the next day and I'm burnt out. I love what I do. I'm taking care of myself with self-care, but I'm still burnt out. I'm like, something doesn't make sense. And what really hit me is the part of like, people say like, when you love what you do, like you shouldn't feel burnt out. I'm like, well, why am I burnt out though? Because I genuinely love what I do. And Friday would come around and I would be so incredibly brain fried. So when this happened, I took a step back and I was like, something has to change, because the self-care, the bubble baths, the, journaling and meditating in the evening wasn't filling my cup enough. And what I started to really experiment with, and this actually came from a little bit of an aha moment from the book called The Artist's Way, is she talks about creativity in terms of your inner child. What does your inner child, like those creative hobbies when you were younger, what are those things? And those will actually recharge you, because it's not this adult form of self-care, a bubble bath and a glass of wine. It's actually like doing something fun and creative and recharging that gets your brain thinking in different ways, that when you wake up the next day, you're like, oh, I actually feel full of energy because I did this really fun hobby that maybe some people will think I'm crazy for doing because it's like so out of left field and so bizarre, and it's not a bubble bath. But that is truly how I started to find myself being recharged. And when I noticed a difference between those two, I was like, holy smokes, like this is what people need to focus on, or at least what I found to be like super, super impactful for me.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you brought that up, because it's like so much of what I hear people doing, like in terms of self-care, they think it means resting, or they take a break from, life. They like close themselves off in the bedroom and they're watching a TV show or they're playing on social media. And you hear it over and over and over again. People are like, I still feel so burnt out and I feel so exhausted. And I'm just putting it out there. Like, social media does not recharge you whatsoever.
Yes. Oh my gosh,
in fact, it probably does the opposite. It drains you even more. But yet so many women are like tuning out to life and trying to just take a mental break by doing that. And then they're wondering why they continue to feel exhausted. But I know, it's like you're talking about like these creative outlets, right? When I sit down with like paint or coloring with my kids, it's almost like it brings in that mindfulness factor, but also at the same time, you're doing something with your hands. So it allows your brain to stop thinking and allows you to be focused on something. And regardless of what the thing looks like at the end, it's like beautiful, right? So the kids and I went to the ceramic shop and they were painting and stuff. And I just picked this little itty bitty plate and I was like painting. I spent probably an hour and a half just painting this little tiny ceramic plate. And it was so rewarding and so rejuvenating for me that I was like, I need to create a mom's night where we all just go to the ceramic shop to be able to do this and like recharge in that way. So I know that that's probably partly why a lot of the women you work with get into the businesses that they do, like these creative, like hobby type things that then they turn and they scale into something bigger and they create something. So why, one, is it important for business owners to have something like that, but also how can they take that and turn it into something that then helps create that financial freedom that they really want?
Yes. Okay. I'll answer your first question first.
I know it was a lot of questions all at once.
No, it was good. It was good. Because this is, I think, is super important in terms of, okay, there's a difference between like adult self-care versus like inner child or recharging and creativity, right? But how I really explain this to people in terms of why it's important is because when you think of it on a daily basis, every single thing that we do is creativity, especially if you're a business owner, no matter what your business is. But if you're posting on social media, that's creativity. If you're sending out emails, that's creativity. If you're reaching out for partnerships, that's creativity. If you're creating a webinar, that's creativity. Every single thing that we do as business owners is from our creative juices that we have in our brain, right? And when you think about a bucket of water, if there is a spout and the water is coming out, what do you put back in if you want to fill that bucket? You put more water. So if we're expending creativity on a day-to-day basis with our business, how you fill that bucket back up is to put more creativity back in it, but a different type. So one that actually fulfills you. And like you said, you get out of your head, you kind of get into your hands. So one thing that I tell people when they're trying to figure out like, okay, what do I do? Because I've been focusing on the bubble baths and I don't know even what this is truly think about what you love to do as a kid. So I love in your example, like if you're a mom, that may mean just playing with your kids with the things that they have, the paint, the pencils, the crayons, whatever it may be, because you have a beautiful example right there. And it's probably reminding you of when you were a kid of what you like to do, right? So I love when moms have kids around because I'm like, just go play with them and like use your imagination with them. And how fun is that? But for someone like me who doesn't have kids, I tell people just think about what you used to like when you were younger, or think about when you were younger. Oh, this is such a good example. If you would go to the store and something that you really wanted, but you couldn't have for whatever reason, maybe your parents didn't have like the money for it, which is more of my situation. So when I started to open up on creativity, on what were some of the things that I wanted to do when I was younger, but my parents didn't really have the funds, so I never got to do it. And now I'm an adult. I'm like, I can buy something for $20 for myself. It's going to be fun, right? So I actually, one thing that I love, I went to Michael's and I bought a paint with numbers kit, which is so freaking fun. And I've heard about them, but I never knew what they really were. But essentially you have this white canvas with a bunch of numbers in different shapes, and they give you the paint and you just sit there and you fill in with the paint those particular numbers, and it turns into this absolutely beautiful piece of art when you're done. So behind me, I don't know if you can see, but you can see that little grease painting, like that's a paint with numbers kit right there.
Love it.
So for me, when I think about when I was younger, I always wanted to be like a painter, but I just wasn't good at it. And even as I got older, I've experimented with watercolor, and I'm like, oh, this is just really hard. Watercolor seems so simple, but it's actually pretty challenging, at least from my perspective. So when I got this paint with numbers kit, I'm like, this is perfect, because I always wanted to like be this great painter. And it's kind of like faking it because you got a little kit that's telling you what to fill in, but it's so much fun to just sit for an hour and totally check out in terms of where your mind is and just paint and be super present. And when you're getting away from work, when you're getting away from all of the things that go on in our head on a daily basis, well, now you're actually recharging.
Yeah.
And you're kind of tricking your brain into recharge because you're busy with something, but it's busy with something that is fun, busy with something that takes your mind away from problems and business. And it truly allows you just to be present, to be mindful, and to just enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's what I love to tell people. I'm like, find something that you wish you had when you were a kid. No matter what it is. And like, do that no matter how silly it is. And I have some people who are like, oh, I used to love to have sticker books when I was a kid and I would trade stickers. I'm like, then go to the dollar store and buy a bunch of stickers and have a sticker book. Like, yeah, it might be silly. And maybe your husband is going to be like, what are you doing with all these stickers? Are these for you or for the kids? But it's feeding that inner child that I think a lot of people don't realize is still within us and is neglected. And if you truly want to be able to show up to your highest potential and your best self on a daily basis, well, we can't neglect parts of ourselves, right? So if that's inner child that's maybe been neglected, which shows up in burnout, well, then have some time to play. And it's like the craziest thing to say. And I just love to see and hear what people do in their creative endeavors when they really open up and dive into stuff like this.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And the first thing that comes to my mind, and like the doubt that I'm guessing somebody's going to say is like, okay, this sounds great, Monica, but I don't have time to sit down and paint. So, or whatever it might be. And I'm sitting there thinking like, oh, I could find ways, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are, because a lot of the people listening are going to be people who are busy, have lots of things going, and maybe aren't even feeling like they have the time for the self-care to then now add in this painting project. So like, where can you add in those small little, how can you do this even if your schedule already feels full and it doesn't feel like it's possible? And then the second question on that is, I'm sure people are sitting there, but like, I'm not creative. Like this wasn't something I was, even as a kid, was not somebody that was super creative. So how do you go about looking that? I know I'm like, I keep throwing you two questions at the same time.
So good.
But your stuff,
answering the first one.
your mind makes me go, yeah, we'll definitely get to that about how you can turn your hobbies and your creativity into a business. But let's talk through this thing. Like people that are sitting there feeling like I don't have the time, or I'm not creative. And what do I do then?
Yes, beautiful. Okay. The question, I don't have the time. So what I would recommend, I mean, it's similar, the quote that people who say they don't have time to meditate for 5 minutes should meditate for 10 minutes, right?
Mm,
So it's similar in this way. So number one, I think understanding the importance. If recharging through creativity is going to make you feel not burnt out and more present and more capable of completing tasks the next day, then why would you not prioritize it?
yes.
So the flip side is you show up burnt out. A task takes you 2 hours when it should take you 1 hour. And maybe you're frustrated. Maybe you're hitting a wall. Everything takes longer than expected. Well, adding in that creativity the day before for like an hour or 30 minutes or 20 minutes is actually going to help you be more present and productive or reach your goals or whatever you want to do, right? So I would actually look at it in that point of view, because then it's not, I don't have the time, and it becomes, how do I make the time? Because this
Exactly.
becomes so important that it's like a non-negotiable, right?
Yeah.
And it's so funny. I was talking to someone who I had on my podcast, and he said this super funny quote. He goes, if I tell someone to like go play and have fun for 10 minutes, they look at me like I'm crazy. If I tell them to work for an additional 10 minutes, they go, okay, I'll do it. Right. So it's so funny that it's like so hard for people to see the benefit of truly like being creative and recharging. So if you don't have the time, just understand how important it is and how much it will benefit you, but also like find pockets, right? And if that means in the morning, maybe you have 10 minutes to yourself, great. Or maybe if it's in the middle of the day, you're starting to feel burnt out and you have 10 minutes there, beautiful. Or if it's the end of the day and you have 30 minutes, great. So find those pockets and really experiment with what works for you. And this is something that I love because you get pretty much instant feedback. You start to feel better so quickly that it's not like, all right, do this for 30 days and let's see how you feel. It's like, all right, try it out. And you're going to see those instant effects that you're going to get addicted to it. And you're going to want to do this when you feel better and start to have fun with it too. So that's what I'll say in terms of time. In terms of not being creative, this is a good one because I actually find myself in that bucket too. I'm not a super creative person. I find myself more like logical, more good at like writing, copy, and tech stuff, behind the scenes stuff like that. So I don't find myself, I'm not like a genuine Picasso or anything like that, right? So if you're not creative, this is such a fun exercise, and people are going to be like, Monica, you're crazy. Literally go to like a Walmart or the dollar store or Michael's. Michael's is a good one. Start there and just walk around to see what catches your attention.
Yeah.
Because that intuition, that nudge, that being drawn to something, there you go. Like that's your inner child, your creativity kind of pushing you towards something. And like I mentioned with the paint with numbers kits, you don't have to be good at it. There's so many fun creative hobbies that you don't have to be good at anything to actually complete it. And it's less about being good at it and more about having fun with it.
Yeah.
So even if it is messy, like great, beautiful, like the messier, the better, right? And there's so many great options out there. I mean, something super simple that people can start with is buy one of those coloring books that have like mandalas on them, where you just color in like circles or in flowers. And it's so meditative. You're doing something creative. You're putting marker to paper. You're present, and you don't have to be good at it since you're literally just filling in the lines, right? So there's simple stuff that you can find that are so much fun and really help with recharging too.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I probably shouldn't say this on the podcast because I got an idea and I'm like, I don't want my clients to hear it, but maybe I'll do it. I'll execute it before the podcast comes out. But I was just thinking, like, I've been sitting there thinking like my clients, they want this, right? They want to figure out ways to recharge. And so I've been kind of brainstorming different ways to create this program. And when you were talking, I was like, oh, maybe I could create some sort of like actually me physically send them this little art project that then we do as like a community. We're all doing this community. So like, but I'm like sitting there, I'm like, my mind, like wheels are literally turning because it is something I'm like, I want to create this element inside my program because it is such a huge component to my program is helping them learn to recharge. And so I've been kind of mulling over it, but I love that idea I'll have to get my daughter. She's like an artist. Maybe she can create us like our own little thing, and then everybody can get it and color it in. But anyway, that's a whole nother side note. My mind, you are literally like making my mind just turn here, because it is so, so important. And so much of like what I talk about with the cycle is like, we have these elements of productivity, but then we have to pull back. And that is like the slingshot that makes us go farther. It makes us go faster. And it is about rewriting kind of that narrative inside of our head, that the more we push, the more results we get, that it's actually inversely, the more that we recharge, the faster we go and the higher that we go. And so I love that we're on the same wavelength and we're talking in that same way. And so now like segue into that, like those people that are like, how, like sitting there, even thinking like, I could take this beyond just recharging. I can take this into something that actually becomes a business, which is like totally up your expertise and jam. I think it's amazing because so many people think like Etsy is just for selling this small little thing. And I know I had a neighbor, she was making t-shirts and stuff like that and selling it on Etsy. And she was making probably over $25,000 a month, like in that first year or so. And I was sitting there like, what the heck are you doing? And she had this whole thing going on in her front yard. Like she had people in her garage, she had employees that were coming and they were working out of her garage, and there was always stacks of envelopes going out and like so much. Right. But I think people don't see that. Like they think that Etsy is just this like, oh, little thing. So I would just love to know how people can turn this creative outlet, this thing that can help recharge them. How can they actually use that to help fuel their family and their business or their life and their dreams? So absolutely go out there.
Yes. And this is something that a lot of people come to me for. So for example, a lot of people, when they were kids, they loved to make jewelry, right? They would buy like these little jewelry kits. So then what happens when they become adults is they actually start making jewelry, and they're making it as a hobby, as a passion project. And then they start to have an entire drawer full of jewelry that they made. Yeah. And then they start gifting it to friends and family for Christmas, for birthdays. And then they get to this point where they're like, okay, I can't gift this to any more people because everyone's got 5 of them. And I still have multiple drawers full because I love to do this as a hobby. So that is 100% where Etsy is like the perfect avenue to sell what you're making. So if you're making something and you're making a lot of it and it's super fun for you and people enjoy it, people love it, Etsy is such a perfect place to put up any of those products that you're making and actually get exposure to people who want to buy it from you. So now not only are you recharging this creative way, but if it's something that people would buy, my paint with numbers drawing, not something that people would buy, but if you have something that people would buy, which is funny, my husband's like, you should totally sell this and say it's an original. I'm like, it's not an original, so I can't do that.
Well, it's an original of your own, but no, I get it. Yeah.
Yes. But seriously, if it's like jewelry, a lot of people love to play with polymer clay, and you can make beautiful earrings. Or even if you go down the watercolor route and you find out you have a knack for it and you're like, oh my gosh, I can create these beautiful paintings of lemons and oranges with watercolor. People go to Etsy to buy from small businesses, to buy from people who make these unique products they can't find on Amazon or Walmart or wherever else they go to shop, right? Or Target or wherever it may be. So it's such a beautiful next step that if you really get into this hobby, Etsy is a great place to sell it because it's so simple to get set up. Doesn't cost any money to get set up, and they bring the audience to you. So you don't need this like Instagram page for your hobby that you have or website. You can just get it set up on Etsy and sell your products there. So beautiful segue in terms of, actually then monetizing a hobby and getting some passive income that comes from it. And you're actually doing it from a place of joy and fun. And then you're getting some cash that comes in for it too. So Etsy, such a perfect avenue for that. It's so simple and just opens up a lot of doors in that way too.
Yeah. Which I think is awesome. Like there's so many people, and I will say, like at one point I was like, oh, maybe I can just throw some stuff on Etsy and whatnot, but it does take some element of understanding Etsy, which I think is where you are. It's like, if anybody's in that boat, they're sitting there thinking like, oh, I've been on Etsy, it didn't work for me, or I want to get on Etsy, but I'm not really sure how. Like that would be the place to go connect with you, because there is a little bit more strategy behind it and there's some awareness of it. But I will say I go to Etsy. Like if I'm looking for something like Etsy, it's either Amazon or Etsy. Like those are the 2 places that I go looking for so much of what I buy is Amazon and Etsy. And so when you think of like other people that are doing that, they're going to Amazon or Etsy or wherever they're going. But like Etsy is a prime place that people are going looking for solutions, or they're looking for products, that I think it's a huge valuable thing to get there and do that. So if you had, other than connecting with you, what would you say is like the number one tip for somebody that's transitioning from that place of like, they have this creative outlet they want to turn into a hobby? What would you recommend?
100%. So I definitely would recommend Etsy for that, just because, like I mentioned, it's super easy, super inexpensive too. So to actually list a product on Etsy, it costs you 20 cents. So if you think about creating your own website, you're paying $300 a year to host that platform, but Etsy, it costs you 20 cents to put your products on there. Beautiful. What I like to really teach people, and this goes into some of the strategy on Etsy, but there's 3 main components. You have to appear in the search results, attract the customer's attention, confirm their expectations by having all the information in your description so they know what they're getting, and then give them trust so they feel confident to buy from you. So it's an acronym of ACT: appear and attract, confirm and trust. So super easy to remember, but essentially what you want to do when you're getting started on Etsy is come from the perspective of, if someone lands on your polymer clay earring that you're now selling, imagine they have no idea anything about the product, no idea about when to expect it to be shipped, no idea of anything at all, and come from that blank slate of mind. And you want to just give all the details possible. I think the only drawback on Etsy, or being a small business owner in general, is sometimes people have bad experiences with other small businesses. There are unfortunately some small businesses out there that are literally just trying to make a quick buck. Yeah. So if you're trying to do that, I mean, then that's kind of a tough situation. But if you truly have this amazing hobby product that came out of your creativity, then just going above and beyond and really educating people on what it is, what they get, when to get it, what it's made of, all of those details, so they feel confident to buy from you. Because people have been burned from small businesses in the past, but as long as you can show them the product from all the different angles, all the descriptions, every piece of information that they need, then they feel confident, then they trust you, and then they purchase from you. So really, in terms of Etsy, a lot of it is over communicating and giving a lot of content and context for those shoppers. But it's not as complicated as it seems. It can, of course, feel overwhelming whenever you're starting anything new, but Etsy, by far, simplest, easiest, fastest way to really get in front of people, which is why I'm such a big fan of it.
Love it. Oh, this was such an amazing episode. Like, we covered so much in terms of like actually recharging, what that looks like, why creativity is so important and how it's different than self-care, and then also how to really turn that into a profitable business. So if somebody's ready to get started on Etsy and wants to learn more, dive into more, follow you, connect with you, keep this conversation going, where can they do that?
Yes. So a couple places. I'm on Instagram, Monica Little Coaching. I also have a free Etsy training, how to get your products seen on Etsy, which is at monicalittlecoaching.com/Etsy webinar. And then I have a podcast too called the Product Biz Podcast, which by the time this launches, Renee will actually have been a guest on my podcast as well. So you can hop on over and see and hear that episode. But I share a lot just in terms of how to grow a small business, a lot about mindset, and just how to be that person that you need to be in order to grow your business.
Love it. Thank you so much, Monica. This was awesome. I know everybody, if you are listening right now and you walked away with something, go let Monica know. I know we both love hearing feedback and like hearing how things landed with you and changed the way you move forward. Or if you're going to go out and start that painting kit or whatever you're going to do, I know Monica would love to hear it. So go ahead and share that with us. And thanks so much for hopping on.
Thank you.